Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Well, it looks like you're going to get a hot war with Russia and China, whether you want one or not. Yesterday morning, an American Reaper drone went down over the Black Sea. We still do not know exactly what happened. We're not going to lie to you. We don't know, and we don't expect to find out anytime soon, if ever. The Biden administration says it knows. It says the unmanned drone was harassed and damaged by 2 Russian fighter jets over international waters. That's all we have. We're going to have to take their word for it. Everybody else seems to be. Lindsey Graham didn't ask many penetrating questions. No, he moved immediately, seized the opportunity to demand that the Pentagon attack the Russian Air Force. If you got to wonder what exactly is going on here. So Lindsey Graham is telling us we have to attack the Russian Air Force. Why now? Well, let's see. On Monday, there was a major development in the 2024 presidential race. We sent out a list of questions to the likely Republican candidates, and we asked them where they stood on the war in Ukraine. And we fully expected that most of them would agree with Lindsey Graham and virtually every office holder in Washington, D.C. But no, that's not what happened. In fact, the opposite happened. Virtually without exception, every Republican presidential hopeful, from Donald Trump, long on the record, to Ron DeSantis, to Greg Abbott, Kristi Noem, Vivek Ramaswamy, and others, has turned against the idea of a hot war with Russia. In fact, Ron DeSantis described what is happening in Ukraine as a, quote, territorial dispute that is not even in the top 5 critical national security concerns of the United States. Now, their position is, in fact, fully in line with the overwhelming majority of conservative voters, the ones who choose the Republican nominee. But those voters have been utterly disenfranchised for the past year as Lindsey Graham and the Atlantic magazine and the ghost of Ronald Reagan have been permitted to speak for them in bad faith. But it's not just conservative voters who don't want war with Russia. It's the majority of all voters. And now there are people running for office, in fact, the most powerful office, who agree with voters, as in a democracy. So for the war party in Washington, this is a flat-out disaster. Oh, the people don't want it. We just spent 2 years lecturing you about democracy, but the bulk of the population and the people they're about to run against Joe Biden oppose it. How can you defend democracy and push a war that the population doesn't want? Oh, you can't. So they're panicking. And the response is really interesting. Instead of responding with arguments or reasons, instead of convincing Americans that war with Russia will benefit them in some way, they're just pushing ahead for that war with Russia. They don't care about Ukraine at all. Ukraine means nothing to them. If it did, they would want to halt the war because apparently more than 100,000 Ukrainians have already died. But they don't care. They're keeping the war going. That's how much they care about Ukraine. And speaking of weakness, the U.S. military increasingly is weak. And part of the reason, there are a number of reasons, but one of them is we're sending all the stuff to Ukraine. So there's the military question that no one seems to have answered. But there's also an economic question. Where's all the money going? So we've spent more than Russia's typical annual military budget in Ukraine, and yet the Ukrainian military is out of ammunition again? Okay, that might be a question for Zelensky. Where's all the money going? You're on the phone with BlackRock all day. Where's all the money going? People are getting very rich. You can't have an audit, because if you want an audit of where your money is going into the most corrupt country in Europe, you're a tool of Putin. But as they were yapping about all of that, they missed, well, some other things that were going on in the United States. Like, for example, the collapse of our economy. The second and third biggest bank failures in the history of this country just took place. Now, the venerable Credit Suisse is down 97% from its all-time high. It's trading for about 2 Swiss francs. You worried about that? Yeah, probably. You should be. Your leaders aren't worried at all. The media don't care at all. Instead, they're telling you that you're a traitor to your country if you don't want a third world war. And they're panicked, of course, just like Milley was panicked in that tape. They're afraid. Why are they afraid? Because they know the public is not on their side. But the second we actually go to war with Russia, they will use that as a pretext to crush all dissent. There is no dissent allowed in wartime. And that's what this is really about, in addition to their personal enrichment. It's about changing the domestic politics of the United States. The second we can all say we're at war with Russia, not in effect, but in reality, in a hot war, which is what they want, that's the moment that you are no longer allowed to express your opinions. And the penalty is jail during war. It's happened a lot, and they want that now. Hopefully, on the basis of the questionnaires we received, other people will take charge soon and save us from this lunacy.